Hello. So we're going to sort of be speaking like this the whole time. I apologize. We've got a few people that are joining us internationally, which is excellent. Oh, you can't see them. I thought I was projecting that. Well, they'll be joining us online, and we're also going to be recording as well for some of our friends that are over, well, many of them over in America and Canada and Indonesia, all over the world. So we will be doing that. Let me get the intro presentation up. So it's sharing for you. Let's share it on Zoom. Oh, come on in. Hello. Okay, hopefully that's sharing for you on Zoom. You can see it? Excellent. Okay. And now we will share here. Do we want to hit the lights or can everyone see okay?
Yeah, well, we can read this.
Is that better for everyone?
Yeah, that's better.
All right. So thank you so much for coming. It is really such an honor to have a packed room. And for some of the people I know have traveled from far afield, I know I had trouble getting here this morning from London. It was a bit of a nightmare, but I'm glad that you have all made it in person. And thank you for those joining online. Sophie and I, for those who don't know us, my name's Lizzie. I am the founder and director of Women Alternative Photography Group. This is Sophie.
Hi, I'm the Darkroom manager here at Bristol House.
Yes, and it has been an absolute honor to work with Sophie on this. We met not that long ago at your exhibition in London.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to do a symposium for a while and sort of bringing together ideas and research and artist practice specifically on alternative photography. And so it's such an honor that you are all here today. Okay, let's make sure this works now. We have already seen that. So just a quick recap. Hello, come on in. Just a quick recap. Women Alternative Photography Group is a feminist research project celebrating women, trans, and non-binary artists from underrepresented groups and from all over the world. It started only a year ago, so we're fairly new, and it's been quite an exciting roller coaster, but because I've been doing my PhD, it has been let's say slow going. But the main idea is to sort of disseminate research on alternative photography and the exciting artists that are using those processes. We have monthly interviews. In case you haven't checked out the website, you can go on there, and we have a new one coming out in a few weeks. So do check that if you're interested in reading any of our interviews. We do Instagram takeovers. If any of you are interested in doing a takeover, just send me a DM and I can get you booked in. We are actually, I think, booked up until like March at the moment, but if there is anyone that is wanting to, just let me know. We sometimes do online meetups when I'm not super busy, but we'll be starting them up again in the new year. So if you want to join online to just sort of share your practice, get feedback, it's a nice way for the community to come together and talk about our work. And it's very like laid back and like chill. It's not like a symposium. It's very calm. Not that this will be. This will be very chill too. Then we did a symposium over the summer with Kai Lewis and Melanie King. Hopefully some of you know their incredible work. They're wonderful. And today's symposium. And we will be having an online conference happening in the new year as well that we will both be doing to we just had such an influx of international people who wanted to participate in the symposium. So we decided to host an online version and it's going to have a few more speakers, so it'll be a conference. So we will be doing that in the new year. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you want to watch. And okay, today's event. Was there anything else you wanted to say before I get onto this?
I can do an intro to the folk house.
Yeah, brilliant.
Is that okay?
Should I go back to this slide?
I haven't done any slides, sorry.
There you go.
You don't need slides. We're in the building. Yeah, so I'm Sophie Sherwood, and yeah, I look after a small section of the Bristol Folk House, which is the Darkroom. At the moment, it's in room 1. You all walk past it and probably were like, what is this? And And yeah, we've also got a room underneath our patio, which we're renovating at the moment. And yeah, anything that goes towards like these events, these kinds of things help sort of like build revenue for that renovation essentially. And we have a whole host of different workshops and things. I've got a list of them in your little leaflet here. Yeah, thanks, Rob. So yeah, any questions that you might have about like some of the processes that are listed there, because some of them might not be familiar to you if you're new to alternative processes, come and see me and Lizzie afterwards. And yeah, also I can do a little tour of the building after this session as well. We've got a craft and flea market happening downstairs. I don't know if anybody went down and had a rummage around. But that's pretty good for like Christmas presents and things. So I can do like a whole tour of the building, and any questions that you have about anything that we do, even if it's not darkroom related, you can ask me because I work here almost full time. So yeah.
Fantastic. So for today's symposium, we have an incredible lineup of speakers, all who sent in their applications to an open call, and so they were selected from a group of people. So we'll be starting, we've kind of divided into two groups. So we'll have the first section, and then if you can save your questions until the end, and then we'll have all of our speakers come sit up here, and we will do sort of a questions at the end. For our online guests, if you don't mind, we will be, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat, and Sophie and I will be monitoring throughout the session. So if you're online and you have any questions that you want to ask our speakers, you can do that. If you don't mind muting yourself while the presenters are speaking. And also this is being recorded, so if you don't want your face on YouTube, turn your video off. For people in person, we have the wonderful Valentina in the back who is volunteering today, which we're so very grateful for, and we'll be taking photos. So if anyone does not want to be photographed, if you can just have a quick chat with Valentina, that would be excellent. The photos will mostly just be sort of for like our own personal use. We'll put it probably on like social media, website, that kind of thing. We won't be selling your images. Cool. Let's get started, shall we? Cindy, I believe you are first.
Okay, so I'm moving out of the way now.
Okay, let me see if I can. Okay.
Just a quick reiteration. Does anybody not want their photo taken? Because I'll be taking it from this angle as well, like with my phone. You can totally say it's totally okay. Good.
Just a sec. We gotta figure out how to make this work. So, Zoom, hopefully you have Cindy's presentation. Here's your presentation for us. Let me just hide that, I guess. It's down here. And then I think it's just the arrow like that. Okay. You okay? Yeah. Excellent. All right, so over to Cindy.
Hi, I am PhD student in creative University for the Creative Art, and I'm doing the study in Chinese queer and the diaspora photography research. Today I will introduce like the gum vitromate prints process and share some of my works. So the gum vitromate print are the pigment process, and so can have any final image colors the artist chooses. So the pigment can carry it in the binder of gum and the of gum Arabic, which heads on the exposure to the light once treated with the vitromate salt. Gum vitromate print can be manipulated during the processing to render many effects, including brush makers and brush marks and the soft blotted edge. once the sensitized sheet is exposed through a negative, the print is developed by the soaking in the water and gently brush off the unheaded area, giving the artist a lot of freedom in the finished image's appearance. Here's some short history of the gum petromate process. Here is all we need to get ready to do the gum petromate process. Everything except of petromate salt is easy to find on like eBay or Amazon. But be careful to use the petromate because it is toxic. So you need to like wearing the glove or something to protect yourself. I usually work in A1 size of the watercolor paper. And for the pigment, I usually use the watercolor pens because the texture, I like the texture. So when we prepare the solution of the petromate, we need to prepare it in a room without the sunlight to avoid the UV exposure. So I usually start by the mixing the gum arabic with the pigment paste. Similarly to like how we mix the painting colors. Yeah. So for the third steps, just leave the whole things in a UV-free environment and keep it dry. Brush the paper. Yeah. Yeah, it is the whole process of doing it. There's some differences between the color and the monochrome. So, normally, sorry. 1 second. Yeah, there's some differences between it. It is like you need to repeat the step 3 to 6 with different colors when you're doing the colorful one. And here is my working process of creating my work. I make some difference between with the traditional method. So I use the shadow of the furniture to explore it directly, and also use the negative of furniture shadow to explore. So here's 2 ways of doing it. Because this technology is highly flexible, so you can design like whatever you want. It is the process I doing the shadow photography. And I can only talk the portrait photos in Darkroom because our school's Darkroom prohibit all of the screen inside. So, and here is my work. As a queer female artist from China, I complete an art project using gum petromate as a medium, which resulted in 6 black and white photographic work and the exhibition. The project themes was the visual reconstruction of the childhood family memories. Growing up in the home southern region of China, my memories of home are largely shaped by wooden furniture, attempted wooden bed, the salted of my father smoking while sitting on a Ming style carved wooden chair. My mom's always busy at the dinner table, and the rocking of my favorite wooden horse by the window in the living room. Those memories of the small house from my childhood evoke both negative emotions and the warmth. The negative emotions stems from how they constantly remind me of my traditional patriarchal family, where the warmth comes from the fact that this was my only home before adulthood. The only place that that shattered me before I left for the university in another city. The intention behind this project was to deconstruct this complex emotional memories through a dreamy classical photographic technique. As a photographer, I usually work with the color film to capture the straightforward, realist images. However, I chose gum bitumen for this project because the materials derived from plants like gum and paper allowed me to draw a deeper connection to the wooden furniture. To create this work, I returned to my childhood home and use the UV light to cast shadow for the old wooden furniture onto the photosensitive paper, capturing the fading memories of those times. So this is my exhibition. I set in the forest because the furniture is originally derived from wood. In my hometown, there's a strong tradition of using solid and rare woods for the furniture. Environmental data shows the China's furniture industry contributes significantly to waste and pollution in this area. So I chose to exhibit in the forest to raise awareness about the importance of protecting trees. That's it. Thank you.
That was excellent, Cindy. Thank you. Let's, I believe Chloe's next. You were a PDF as well, weren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's switch it on Zoom first. I feel like that's easier. I don't know. Oh, stop sharing. We're already in Zoom. Hello, we have a new person online. Welcome, Sarah. We're just moving on to our second presentation. Just a moment. Yours is a PDF. I had it earlier.
Yeah.
It was the one.
It's
Yeah. Where did it go? Do not mind. Talk amongst yourselves. Well, I definitely got
I think it's there. It says very old. No.
this one. Oh, here it is. There we go. Present. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Just a second. Okay, we're sharing on Zoom. I do present. Hopefully you can also see that on Zoom.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, over to Chloe.
Get it back to the beginning just quickly.
That's okay. There we go.
Hello. I'm a little bit nervous about doing this. Very happy behind a camera, but not in front so much. But we're probably all a bit like that. Yeah, I'm Chloe. I'm a camera woman and photographer. This series that I'm presenting is largely tintypes, and it's about sirens. I do a lot of work about kind of women and water, looking at like beauty and desire, and looking at myths and memories. They're quite kind of slippery, strange things, which kind of works with the subject. And yeah, I experiment a lot within my practice, lots to do with like surface texture and scale, and kind of, yeah, seeking out accidents, I suppose, a lot of the time. But yeah, I'll kind of go through the work and then go into a little bit more at the end. Yeah, so this is from an exhibition I did recently with a couple of other female artists. One is here today as well. And yeah, within the tintypes, I managed to kind of, yeah, manipulate, I guess, the surface and the colour, which was a nice happy accident because it's got this blue tone to it, which I wasn't expecting at all. But and this kind of water-like quality on the surface. Again, wasn't completely expecting it. I kind of play a lot with heat. So it was instead of making a completely smooth, perfect surface, it was trying intentionally to not do that. I think I did a lot of color darkroom work when I was younger, and it was all really precise and kind of interesting, but not really my nature to work that way. So I think it was kind of pushing against that precision a little bit. And then this is just a close-up of it. Got some props. The tintypes themselves are tiny. They're like these little 35mm pieces. But I've blown them up in exhibitions to kind of A0 size. So you get this, yeah, the detail's incredible, and you get this kind of quite strange, like organic surface texture, especially when they're printed big. Yeah, and then yeah, this is more from the same series, looking at kind of myths around sirens, so kind of shape-shifting women. And this is a beautiful example of the kind of using heat to change the surface pattern. I did not realize exactly what this was until a scientist saw the exhibition, and he's like, oh, it's like a vector pattern. But to me, it kind of looks like, yeah, kind of a human organism, or maybe a magic eye or something. But yeah, so they've got lots of kind of, yeah, beautiful accidental qualities to them. This is me. And again, I think slightly rebelling against that kind of precision of other work that I do. It's yeah, I wasn't careful with the negatives, which makes me feel slightly anxious saying it, but they were kind of stored in like a dusty space, and the surface kind of comes alive a little bit with these. And part of what I like experimenting with is that kind of opposition of what you're seeing. So most of these images look kind of quite still and old and beautiful and relatively natural, but the reality is really, really different. So it's like these later, now I'm going to put it on. I did that last week. So the reality is really different. They're like these garish latex man-made things, which I wish I'd taken more behind the scenes photos when I did it. And then this is the crown that was in one of the other pictures, again, kind of a bit strange. I actually started off with some real prawns on a crown that were frozen, but it's quite hard to get it right. Anyway, so like, yeah, I like that kind of experimentation as well. Again, kind of fitting with the theme of like, yeah, what you see isn't what you get, and kind of looking at femininity in that way a little bit. Yeah, and these kind of, yeah, amazing textures that come along through perhaps a little bit of carelessness in my view, but it worked really well. And yeah, some more from this series. Also looking at kind of not applying the emulsion for the tintypes in a perfect way. So I don't know if you guys have done anything with tintypes before. They're little pieces of tin or big pieces that you put a light sensitive emulsion onto, and then you have to dry them either very, very carefully or in a quite slapdash way. And then you expose them in a camera. So I've just kind of converted a little old Olympus camera and put these tin plates in. But the emulsion in this instance, in the top corner, it's put on too thick, but they kind of have this, I don't know, like galaxy quality to them, these kind of accidents of yeah, layering things on too quickly or too thickly. This is one that in theory it's not perfect, but I dried this really, really perfectly, or as much as I could. So it's like a much more considered surface, which I quite like, but I really like the messy ones a lot more. And this was exposed, I guess, correctly, for want of a better word. So it's got a kind of more natural brown quality to it, but it's the ones that I kind of messed up a little bit that I actually like a lot more. This was one of the first ones I tried. I think it's always kind of nice to see like a kind of starting point. Often we just see the kind of, yeah, polished finished piece. Yeah, so this is one of the starting points when I couldn't figure out the emulsion completely, and it's like drips of it everywhere, but like a kind of horror film still or something. And yeah, another one, a happy accident that you can't see my face, like, but it's like all these kind of ghostly, lovely qualities to it when, yeah, either you push the texture a bit, or yeah, aren't really sure what's going to happen. And this is another one that was the kind of experiment at the beginning, and it was not developing it for that long, which I think gives it the which gives it the kind of blue quality. It's not giving it enough time kind of intentionally to yeah, shift the color. And yeah, so there's a little bit about me and kind of why I do this, which I've gone over a little bit. But yeah, so I work filming and doing photography, and I've got a background in design as well. And I think that kind of feeds into why I do this, and why also I like the tangibility of these little tintypes. I think a lot of the other work I do is quite fast and digital, and it's a really nice kind of antidote to that. Yeah, so the tintypes for that reason, I love that they're these like beautiful kind of little physical things. I like that I plan quite a lot around when I make them, but also you have to kind of give over to the chaos side of things. So that balance is something that I really like. And but the reality being a latex shark mask. And I actually did not know about the term hydrofeminism until I accidentally a hydrofeminist, which is exciting. Need to learn more about it. But yeah, it's just, yeah, an area that I've always been drawn to. And yeah, so that's kind of what I do, really. I think of kind of experimentation as like an equal collaborator, I guess, within what I'm doing. I'm not in control of a lot of it, which I kind of enjoy. And yeah, I think embracing all the kind of planned and happy accidents, really. Yeah, that's it. Stuff away. And thank you.
You, I absolutely love this shark mask. I feel like you should just wear it for the whole thing.
I wore it for Halloween recently.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but it's yeah, not just for Halloween.
I think it would be if we just all just sat here wearing them the whole time.
It's like a gift, like little comfort blanket, you know, if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable.
There you go. Okay, next we have Rona. PowerPoint, yes. This one here. I think I have to. Actually, I think I have to escape first, put it on Zoom. Just a moment. Okay, hopefully everyone on Zoom can see that. We're good here. Let's make this full screen.
Yeah.
Working okay on the Zoom. Is it gonna go full screen?
It's not full screen right now.
People on Zoom are gonna get a little preview.
Uh,
Because you can't really go into, you can't share on Zoom when this is in full screen. That's okay. I apologize to everyone on Zoom. You're gonna get a little preview of what the slides are. Rona, over to you.
Thanks. I'll just get it up. Okay, so. And so then it's just. Is it just this one? Is that right? Like this?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I'm just going to time myself.
Do you do that again, Rona? Just in case they have a little chat.
Hang on a moment.
You just swipe.
Yeah.
through.
No, it's not. That's all
Do you
right.
go full screen and then share the screen?
Do you
Is
want to
that
go
what you
here?
do?
That's what I tried to do. My apologies, everybody online / in person. Let's see here. Okay, so if we go. Oh, it's already in full screen here.
Maybe they're in slideshow.
Oh. So if we go full
Does-
screen here first.
To the presenter mode.
Yeah, I don't know what it's doing. So now it's full screen here, but now how do we get to Zoom?
Yeah, going down.
Just make it smaller. All right, here we go. Share. This one, hopefully.
Yeah, it should be. Your PowerPoint slideshow, is it? Yeah, no screen. Is it? So we can check.
Is it working over there? If we go through,
It's better. But yeah, if you cycle through just in case.
Yes, yeah.
oh, huzzah! Okay, sorry, everyone.
No worries.
It's
It's lunchtime. Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Rona. Nice to be here. So I'm talking about something that I've named the new somatic photographic. So you thought you were attending a really chilled out photography symposium on a Sunday, but actually you're witnessing the birth of a new photography movement, no less. So just thought I'd aim small. And I think this photographic movement has been going on for some time, but I think that somehow I'm just going to time myself so I don't go over because I have got millions of slides. Yeah, I think somehow I've recognised this, and so yeah, I'll just read my kind of intro about what my thinking was first of all. So whether making photographs with my mother under great sheaves of photographic paper, or fantasising that I can meld minds with the world oceans as I develop photographs with the sea, dialogue and collaboration at the heart of my own photographic practice. And yet photography is not typically considered something relationship-based, with something jarringly singular in that photographic eye. Situated as a lone pursuit, photography risks remaining tethered to cerebral, colonial, patriarchal, solitary, hero dominating the landscape cliché positioning. I've long envied musician friends for their ability to jam together in a way that photographers don't. And I'm desperate to help shake off such shackles and breathe a new somatic photographic into being, which envisions an interdisciplinary, expanded, eco-feminist, feeling-led photography, led by embodiment, sensuality, listening and exchange. So this was brought together probably from my past. So I grew up a hippie, so I think that I always had this like very strong connection to almost a kind of, I had like a very bohemian, but definitely not idyllic childhood, where my father is a convicted armed robber, but then my parents were also hippies. So it was this very strange juxtaposition. And what that meant was I had this really animist sense of life. So everything was given a life force. And so what that gave me was a very charged relationship with materials and objects, which then lent itself to my photographic world. I dealt with growing up in Kent and being an environmental activist before the internet by having 84 pen pals when I was 12, all over the world. And I also dealt with it by plunging myself into the rave scene and just looking at kind of countercultures, to be honest, and other ways of living and being. I told myself that if I was living in Iceland rather than Maidstone, I'd be understood. And I worked a lot in photographic labs. So I had a dark room as a teenager where I would secretly smoke. And what I really enjoyed about it, very dangerously, and what I really enjoyed about it was that my friends would come around and they'd tell me things. So I noticed that they told me things that they wouldn't tell me in the light. And I noticed that the dark room became was a space of transformation. And so I worked in these different photo labs in London as a student, but I was actually studying psychology. So for me, psychology and photography have always been connected. They're about internal spaces, and I'm always trying to enter the mind of photography and the mind of light sensitive materials, which I experience as alive. So zoom out from that a moment. If we're thinking about where we actually are right now, I would say, we're embedded in these bigger dysfunctional systems of colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, heteronormativity, etc. And that I was reading a book this week, and what was highlighted was these denials. The denials that, and I'm aware it's pretty heady and it's a Sunday, so maybe take your time reading it. But essentially, the denials that we're in this soup. We're in this soup of dysfunctional systems that don't serve the earth, that abuse the earth, that extract from the earth. And I'm a huge fan of the eco-sustainability movement that's going on in photography at the moment, which is looking at other ways that we can work with, make photography sustainable and make it not part of and implicit with the systems of dominance and patriarchy, which it often is, by default, especially it coming from Victorian times. And so, but I'm not going to talk so much about those eco-sustainable methods today, because I'm aware I think there's already quite a lot of conversation about that within photography, which is great. But I thought what I might talk about is what I've noticed instead, which are other methodologies for undoing, I'd say, and turning photography really into a space of social activism and a space of ecofeminism. And I think this is already going on and has been going on the whole time. But I think by bringing focus to it and foregrounding it, perhaps through the principles of it, maybe we can come out of the systems of abuse earlier. That's my fantasy. So one of the first principles of moving from an unhealthy space to a healthy space is to think about we instead of me. So what do I mean by that? So this is and I'm going to be talking about some of my practice and also other artists practicing, I think, with these principles. So this was a sketch for an Imagine performance I did back in 2016, where I wanted to, anyway, I'm not going to talk about it too much, I'll just give a glimpse of it. But it was the beginning of me thinking about photography as collaboration and photography as performance and photography as being live and alive, I guess. And this led to me making these very large works, which are like 2 meters by 1.5 meters with my mother. And first of all, I just got her involved because I needed somebody else to help me. And I was doing it in her garden in Kent, and she helped me to make the large darkroom bag that these large photographic works required. And then we started to work together really well on this project. So it made me think about, and then also in the developing process, I was studying at the Slade School of Art at the time, doing my master's, and I found that I literally physically couldn't develop the work unless I was working in collaboration with another artist. So photographic practitioner Eleanor, whose work is in, I'll show you, she actually helped me, and it was like we were like marinated in fixer, it was like, oh my god, it was like this huge slooshing whilst we made this work. It was very dramatic. So these are stills from this. And then also that Iceland connection I was talking about earlier on led to a photographic collaboration, which I did for a number of years with another artist in Iceland. And her and I, she's definitely, we did a lot of work around hydrofeminism actually, so I'll talk about that afterwards. But we bonded in our love of water and sensuality and working with the elements, and worked together for a number of years, and actually made this work where we can't remember who took the photo and whose hand that is. So it's this kind of blurring. So So what's happening there is, instead of the photograph being, this is mine, this is how I see things, you know, which is extremely narrow and about a system of dominance, instead it becomes a place of exchange and a place of being able to actually lose our identity and move on from this notion of the individual, and much more into a sense of collaboration and connectedness. This was a performance I did in the States, where we made a textile work, which we then washed in the lake at the site of Black Mountain College, which I would argue is also one of the places where photography got really framed as an interdisciplinary space, rather than, you know, photography can have its own isolationism away from drawing or painting or, you know, other art histories. And so I think when we bring photography into relationship with other disciplines, we bring it out of that loneliness. And out of that stuckness, really, that I experienced working in photography shops. So yeah, here's more stills from that performance. And this I worked with alongside this Darkroom that I used to live in North Carolina, and so I was part of this Darkroom. So I asked them to get involved with this performance with me. So yes, like I said, interdisciplinary versus photography being this lone discipline. This is a work by Sarah Fuller, who's a Canadian artist that I met on a residency, and here she's actually transformed herself into a rock. This smaller rock in the front is actually her. So she's used the photographic image and she's turned it into a textile, and then she's turned herself into the rock. So thinking about those cross-discipline dialogues. And then bringing in a queer artist, Mina White, their early work. This is just a simple photograph of a wall, but the wall is transformed into something like a drawing or a painting. And then Sol Steinberg, an immigrant from Eastern Europe to the States. He's here combining drawing and photography and wit and humour as well. This is a work by Faye Godwin, where she was looking at the relationship of plants and photography, and almost like the plants, you almost get this sense that the plants are pressing up against the lens. Anyway, I need to hurry up, so I've just realised how many slides I've got. Okay, so I might just let you see some of these. This is Eleanor, who Eleanor Andrea, we worked together at the Slade. We were on the MFA together. And this was a series that they made in Romania, where they come from, where they actually physically scratched the photographs with sandpaper. So bringing in that discipline of drawing, I'd say. And then Rebecca Nadowski, who we presented together on a talk about more than human photography, which you might be interested in. It's on YouTube. And yeah, these are some works they made, looking at the more than human elements, bringing them into the photographic space. And so, yes, that leads me to acknowledging the more than human, acknowledging all the other elements that go into making a photograph rather than just the human. You know, what about the chemical? What about the air? What about the water that we're using? And how all of those actually influence the end photograph that we get. And you might even say there is no end photograph, because a lot of those chemical processes continue behind the scenes. And Sigmar Polke, who I've got some work of, he actually took great humour in making some work that didn't actually fix, and he sold it to an art gallery, and then they opened it up and the photograph had just actually completely disappeared. It's like, well, sorry, the photographic processes continued. There was nothing I could do. But I love that sense of aliveness, that sense of not being fixed, not being able to capture this thing. Becky Lyon is an artist in a research group. We're in a research group together, and they did this work which acknowledges the live microbes in the air that also influence the work that we're creating. All these other unknown species that we're constantly in relationship with, in collaboration with, that we're breathing in and breathing out, but because we can't see them, we tend to ignore them. This was a work I made exposing a roll of film to an eclipse when I was living in New Zealand, and yeah, wanting the rays of the eclipse to I wondered actually, could they reach this roll of film? Just gonna check my time. And I remember, like, I had to have a big argument with the photography shop there about getting this developed and printed. They were like, "There's nothing on this roll of film." But I was, because I worked in darkrooms and things, I was comfortable with kind of really persisting. But it was yeah, I had to really sort of fight my corner, and then it came out. I was so pleased. You can see a detail of the work there. And then these were works I made in Australia on a residency in the bush with fire. Actually, I was thinking about the relationship of fire to light, and how, of course, fire is the fire, you know, and the sun are the original light that we're then mimicking with electricity. And what would it be like to expose photographs using fire? And so that's how I made these works. So also, you know, cheering one another versus competing. That's definitely going to start to undo these large systemic influences on us, because, you know, we're taught as photographers to, you know, well, there's only room for one of us at the top, you know, and so instead, you know, bringing in ecofeminist elements where there's room for all of us. There's, you know, we don't have to compete for some one tiny measly crumb. We can enjoy and celebrate one another. And artist Leah Collette and I, we curated a show where we brought in artists looking at works made, you know, made through an eco-feminist lens, and it was very celebratory, and it was very egalitarian, and felt very equal and joyous. Actually, it was, you know, rather than this kind of scarce fighting over something that we can be encouraged to do. And yeah, and then this is a similar. There was a talk that I gave with Rebecca that I was talking about, and there was a sense there of collaboration, of camaraderie. This is also some work by Joy Gregory, where she was looking at who's a black female photographer working with cyanotype, hand-painted cyanotype, and looking at these objects. And what I was interested in there was that these objects were the size 1:1. You know, so that is you see the fan. The fan is the size that it actually is. So there's this sense of equality as you see the work. And this was a work that Lizzie has seen before, actually, where I foregrounded water as an element. Okay, so I'm going to start to. So I think one of the vital things that I've already seen this morning, the earlier presentations, is about this listening versus I've got this. There's something about the not knowing that is really vital to experimentation. And I'm really always inspired by and often return to artists who really plunge themselves into these early photographic processes and went with the, you know, what happens if I try this, and how darkrooms have that inherently within them. And when we don't know, then we're teachable, then we're open to learning, then we're open to being taught, then we can actually listen. And then these are images here from the Lakeside Darkroom, which is a feminist darkroom in South London. And so these are some images that are made there. And they have sessions which are specifically for women, etc., to feel safe in that space, and that they can occupy this, you know, this art discipline that is still the default is male dominated. So I'll just start to finish up. Yeah, so these are some works by Lindsay Sears. You may have seen these before. They're optograms. She made them by putting photographic work inside photographic paper inside her mouth, and then exposing the works, opening her mouth, which is just fantastic, isn't it? And this this for me brings this sense of like being in the body rather than just living in the head. And I started to think about this idea too this is a work I made by crawling across a field in Cornwall, because what I was wanting to do is I was wanting to collapse this distance between me and the field, and get in a sense of like, what would it be like to be in the field, to be a being in the field. And so this is a film, you can see it on my website, called If I Eat You, Will We Both Still Be Okay? Looking at my relationship with plants and plant matter. All right, I'm aware I need to finish in a moment, so I'll just show you some of these. These are some works I made, just start to finish up. These are some works I made in relationship with my photocopier during COVID. And where I was interested in squashing myself into relationship and kind of getting inside the mind of the photographic scanner. And thinking, and again, coming out of my head and into my body, and letting my body lead the way, and letting a body memory lead the way, so that it was a somatic practice rather than a psychological one. And these are some artists working with materials who are thinking about the materials being alive. Anyway, I can see I've squashed way too much in this, but I hope you're enjoying the highlights. Yeah, and these are artists making work which acknowledges the aliveness of materials, rather than thinking of, you know, this is a dead table. Instead, being acknowledging that there's live atoms in this table. There's aliveness everywhere. Like I was saying, the animism with which I grew up with. And these are works I made in the sea, which was working with the same idea. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I think. Yep. Nice.
Thank you. You stay up here. I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
do questions.
Sure.
So we get Chloe and Cindy and some chairs. Oh, maybe that's the wrong one, wow.
Just use it, yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to.
Do you want to? Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
Do you want to sit here? I'll go there.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
grab with,
Yes. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, my scribble of
No,
notes.
no, go for it.
All right, hello, everybody online. Okay, so I realize you can't see everyone. Maybe I will tilt when people are speaking, like so. We'll do a little, that kind of action.
Yeah.
All right, so hello to everyone online. Thank you so much to our speakers. I mean, congratulations, that was all fabulous. Well done. I realize this is just on me and that's creepy, I apologize. Oh, we got that in the background, excellent. So, I mean, I think when we were looking through the presentations and selecting, yours sort of popped out and was very, touching on these very key themes that we were both passionate about. But I want to start off with a question for everyone. And then if anyone has any questions that you have ready to go, or I'll let you kind of think about it while we do these questions. And then we'll come to you in just a second. So we can start maybe with you and we'll sort of move this way. The question is, why is it that you are using specifically alternative photography to talk about the themes that you're covering in all of your work, rather than say, like digital photography or something like that?
I think for me, it's all about the slowness and the finite amount of images that I can create with it. I think, as most people probably are, it's all on your phone, it's all digital, it's really fast paced and not always considered. And sometimes I love that, don't get me wrong, sometimes that's great. But for me, I have been trying to reconnect with my art practice after a bit of a hiatus, and I just wanted to play again, and I think the alternative side of photography allowed me to do that. The tangibility, there not being a right or wrong necessarily, and also actually linking back to kind of the themes of a lot of my work with women and water. It's literally the motion of it as well. It's the developing, the slowness, that kind of oceanic sloshing. Like there's something beautiful about that, which just kind of grounds me. So yeah, that's it for me.
I love your use of sloshing.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. I would say similar. I think that I realized what you shared around earlier on about about perfectionism, and I used photography as analog was the default when I was growing up, and then digital came in, and I just found that I would take a photograph and then it didn't look quite like how I wanted it to, and I delete it and then I take it again, and I was like, this is a really boring process. And I found that I felt very in the way, and I felt also like I was in control. Whereas what I really enjoyed about analog photography always was that gap between making and seeing, and how little I could control the results, actually, because then there was a learning for me. There was, if I'm not teachable and I already know everything, well then that's dull. and just as I love photographic materials because they're transformative, I want to be transformed by the process, that's what I'm there for, I guess. I also think I'm just so passionate about counterculture narratives, to be honest, and so I think I'm always interested in the alternative, because the default is it tends to be pretty negative, right? So I think that the alternative processes allow for community and connection and collaboration in a way that that sort of normal processes don't. Yeah.
That's the thing. I never know what to call it.
Yeah.
Traditional, normal, other.
Yeah.
How about you, Cindy?
Actually, it is very similar with you too. Like, I really like work at Darkroom because everything can be controlled by myself, and yeah, we can make like the texture or maybe change the material rather than just taking photo of like digital camera. Yeah. And I also really like to work at Darkroom because we always need to turn off the iPhone and like focus on the washing or yeah, whatever. It is very enjoyable and a playable process. Yeah.
I find it very meditative, kind of being
Yeah,
immersed. You're in the dark and
Yeah.
like you're saying, the sloshing and
Yeah.
the movement. It's very very peaceful. Do we have any questions in the crowd? Yes.
I'm really curious about your developing photos with light and when it can be fire. You were saying and burner. Because I run my photography and social class sessions with the kids.
Oh yeah.
And who are faced with trauma, and I'm really interested in how I can tie those two together. I'm curious how you actually physically do that.
How did I physically expose it with fire?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was on art residency in Australia in the bush, and so I made a darkroom really close to like in nature, and then I took photographic paper and I was wrapping. I've been doing quite a lot of work where I was wrapping photographic paper in relationship with nature and objects and looking at that closeness. I'd spent a lot of time in Dungeness, where I don't know if you know that area. It's where Derek Jarman lived in Kent. It's like this big spit of shingle that goes out into the sea, and there's a nuclear power station there, but there's also a lot of artists, like an artist community there. It's a really strange combination. And what Dungeness allowed for was that it's very wild, and but it's very safe. So as a woman, I felt very safe at night, like working there. And I was doing a whole project about night because actually I was wanting to conquer my fear of the dark. and so I thought, right, I'm going to go and work in the night. And so I was making work at night and with photographic paper and nature and thinking about and then developing them and then seeing photograms essentially and seeing how they came out. And so from there, I've been working with torches, and then I started to work with matches, and then I started to play more and more. So then when I was on this art residency in Australia, I had like an opportunity like to go really much more deeply into that practice and bringing the fire like match lighting and fire in relationship with the paper and with nature. I've got a whole series I can show you. But I did and those large works I did with my mum in the garden. They were the same. They were using fire as well. So it was a process I used for quite a long time. Yeah, so it's, I mean, obviously, it's a bit dangerous, you have to, yeah, exactly. But as part of the adventure, yeah. But I can talk to you more about it afterwards. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Hello. Yes, over here.
Hi. I actually have a comment for Cindy. I really love your understanding of materiality because, like, when I saw your final exhibition, how you shared your work, that actually showed how you can expand on the thought of just also communicating with pictures as well. Like, it's not about just the process of making, but also how you can share and what is the intent behind it. So in the last part, you were sharing about how you wanted to share it in like on the trees and what is your connection with gum paper and the furniture. It showed your vision about or your understanding of belongingness and how far you are from home, which I can relate to. And it's a very beautiful thing that you shared. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I just had this comment.
No, excellent. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Yep.
I have a bunch.
A bunch, okay.
But
We don't have a
I'm
ton
not-
of
I'm
time.
not gonna take too much time. I just want to first say a comment to Cindy. I'm currently researching a lot about dark rooms in the home and like our understanding of like the home. So to hear you talking about the kind of shadows of furniture and what that means in your relationship with home was really interesting to listen to. So thank you so much for that. And then I had two other questions, two questions. So for the many slides you had, do you know how many of those photos that you shared were actually collaborative projects?
Well, I'd say they were all collaborative because they were all working with materials in a conscious way,
Okay.
I'd say.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I'm not quite awake yet.
Oh, no.
because I
Don't worry,
thought
there was a lot
maybe,
in there,
a lot
like-
of your, what you were talking about was,
Yeah.
was people collaborating together as well.
Yes.
But do you know how many of those were like people collaborations, or is it just?
I think most of them weren't people
Okay,
collaborations. Yeah, a few other, but I was saying that collaboration, I think, is one of the ways that, and making collaboration conscious is one of the ways that I see photography being a social activist space, rather than think that, you know, the singularity of, because all those systems of capitalism, they're all based on the individual,
Yes,
right, and dominance, individual dominance versus an equal society, right? So, and also collaboration's hard, isn't it? You know, I mean, relationships, you know, they're challenging, they bring up our stuff, right? So I think that having to work, you know, like even my mum and I having to work together, you know, it wasn't that long a project together, but we discovered stuff about one another by doing that. You know, we had to set our differences aside, and, you know, it was, you know, even just like, oh, can you give me a bit more that way? And, you know, you know, this huge piece, navigating this massive piece of paper in the dark, you know, it's, it plunges you into an experience you wouldn't have with that person, and through that intimacy, then the relationship deepens, and connections are made that wouldn't be otherwise. But I know that there are, you know, there are sort of photographers that specialize in collaboration and collaborative practice, you know, perhaps with teenagers, or you know, with isolated communities, or, you know, or photographers who work in pairs, you know.
Then I have heard the term hydrofeminism.
Oh, yeah.
Someone.
I think perhaps you should explain it.
I'm talking a lot.
No, I don't really know. It's like it's just about kind of innate connection between women and water, in a very loose that. And there are a lot of like very much more like scientific research-based views on it. And I think you probably, I think Rona probably knows a lot more than I do. But it's just like it's quite a visceral term, isn't it? Like it's like it kind of transports you quite quickly, and you can kind of, in my view, not knowing heaps about it, it makes perfect sense instantly. It's a kind of natural pull and a natural connection. But I don't fully understand the concept.
I'll add to what you said. I'll add just to support it. Like it comes from a book by called Bodies of Water by Astrid Amanis, who's an academic, and it's a great book. She's talking about how one of the things she talks about is how is the falsity of the boundaries of the earth, you know, of different nations, for instance. And one of the examples she gives is how the chemicals from a power plant in North America are found in the breast milk of a woman in Greenland, and how this, how there's these bodies of water that connect us all, and that we're taught to ignore them, to be alien to them, when actually they're, like you're saying, they're like completely natural to us all. So I really recommend the book. The book's great. Bodies of Water. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm just going to check to see if we've got any questions coming in on Zoom. Looks like we got a chat. Oh, we have a comment for you saying, I loved Cindy's exhibition in the forest. I had to fight people's skepticism to hold an exhibition on a beach. The curators were afraid the sea would come in and destroy the work. That was the whole point.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting, though, sort of doing something in a public space where you have to get permissions from, you know, the city or the town, and if it's like private park or something. So congratulations on working through that and getting it up. Did you have anything you wanted to say on how you made that happen?
I actually just chose a like very quiet place and no any child. Yeah. And I find like a lot of friends to help me to doing this exhibition. So it is success. Yeah.
Collaboration.
Luckily, yeah.
Community.
Collaboration, yeah.
I have, I think, just one last question for you, if that's okay. I apologize if people are getting sick on Zoom. Good boy. Here we go. So there's an element of performance in yours, but also in yours, this performing in front of the camera with these props, very comical in some cases. I was just wondering sort of what your feelings of what the connection between, you know, the sitter and the camera and the performative element of it.
It's a good question. It's funny because anyone who knows me, I'm quite like I'm not like a performance person. I'm an observer a lot of the time. So maybe this is a safe space for me to not be that. Yeah, and it was never like an intentional thing. It was more out of I was thinking about this yesterday about the fact that I'm in a lot of the images, and it was more out of proximity rather than vanity, I think, I hope. But yeah, I guess what was the question again? Sorry.
Just sort of some thoughts on performance, really.
Yeah, it's funny. I wouldn't have thought that I was performing, but I definitely am, you know, and I think it's kind of, yeah, there's a freedom in it. It wasn't a conscious decision. It's just something that kind of happened. But it's quite liberating, actually. Yeah, kind of gives you a little bit of space to shake things up a bit. But yeah, it's yeah, my 25-year-old self would be like, what are you doing? But yeah, I guess it creates a distance a little bit to have a bit more freedom sometimes. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Cool.
Can I just ask that really briefly? Because
Yeah.
I think that when you're using the prop, you're using those props in very purposeful ways. So yeah, the rubbery shark mask is allowing you perhaps, I don't know, but I kind of feel like that sometimes props become like conduits to enable different forms of performance.
Yeah.
In ways that don't feel as perhaps exposing or inverting a kind of portrait femininity or before, you know, that kind of
Yeah, I
thing,
think
which I
like
think-
quite often with things I do, I don't think about them very much when I do them, and then the reasoning comes in afterwards. But this was all about some myths about women and water and sirens, particularly, not to be confused with mermaids, something like that, who are like these kind of hybrid creatures who are kind of quite like I don't know, harsh and like dangerous and like half fish, half bird women, like not these kind of beautiful soft things, but these kind of quite wily, in between shape-shifting creatures. So it was kind of, playing with that. I'm more of a show-off than I realized.
All right. Well, I think we're probably getting close to our break time. So we're going to take a little break here. I'll just sort of put this on pause. We'll come back at say 2:15. Does that sound okay? So we'll come back. I'm not sure what time it is for you where you are in the world. But in like 10-ish minutes, 2:15, we'll come back. But thank you so much to our speakers so far. Congratulations. Excellent presentations. And we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, everybody online, we're gonna get started in just a few seconds. We're just waiting for everyone to come in. I'm going to hand it over to Sophie now.
Okay. Right, I'm gonna introduce Ria Panwar. Bear with me whilst I haven't done Zoom for a little while, so I think I can manage. Yeah, is it weird? Let's see. I think that's worked. Yeah, so here's Ria. Is that okay?
I'm thinking that they should.
You know more than me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ria. Sharing.
Hello and namaste. My name is Ria Pamar, and how would I define myself? I think I'm someone right now, a nomad. I come from India. That's where my roots are, and that's where my story started. And now I'm in the UK. I did my master's from the RCA in visual communication. I am a designer, an artist, and someone who's currently exploring alternative photography. So yeah, let's start. So okay, there's I'll just speak it up. So starting with the thought of what is experimentation for all of us. I think for me, experimentation is sort of a space where I cannot be perfect. I should not be perfect, and I'm allowed to be imperfect because it helps me to kind of just expand on my thoughts and ideas and be who I am in the space. And while I was kind of navigating through these ideas, I stumbled upon alternative photography to kind of see how that is going to help me expand my version as well. So my process is very much like I kind of dive into materiality, visual narrative, techniques, of course, because that's going to help me get my result. And just trying to see how everything works for me to kind of understand what I mean to communicate with anyone or how I am communicating. And for me, in alternative photography and experimentation, the other very important thing is how the work is also presented. I think that's how, when anyone sees your work, what is their understanding of it? Maybe I had some thought while creating it, but when I put it out, I actually don't expand on that thought anymore. I just let it be. And it's exciting to see how different people understand the meaning of different things that I create. So yes, a small mind map, a visual from an archive, a story, a display, the idea of ephemeral art, because I love the idea of letting go. I love the idea of just, let your work be. How can you understand that it is not yours anymore? And I think that's something very exciting about alternative photography itself, because it just lets you create something and then you have to see how it's going to evolve or how it's going to change with time, or how the chemicals or the space or the people would actually react to your work itself. So today I'll be sharing 3 of my projects with the title Experiment 1, 2, and 3, because those are my experiments. And while I share them, I actually don't want, I'm sharing my knowledge and my techniques, but that doesn't mean that will work or should work for everyone around me. Everyone kind of finds their own route about the same thing. What I'm sharing is a piece of understanding that I have understood or concluded, but everyone in this room is just like, they can ask questions later on, of course, during the panel. And I'll be happy to answer in a sense of what I have gained through those conclusions and how you can navigate your space around those mediums as well. So experiment 1, I always start with questions because questions help me to understand what I am dealing with in terms of thoughts or how I'm trying to tackle. So how do we decay? as a part of nature? Am I nature, or is nature me? Why do I feel the need to preserve something defined by time? I should just let it go. So this is one of my experiments where I was trying to use Polaroid emulsion lift on fruits. Of course, I started with paper, easy. You know, take the Polaroid and, you know, experiment on paper, see how the folds are coming out. Then I was just like, why not expand the meaning of Polaroid emulsion itself? So I started to navigate my canvas around my space and where I come from. So I come from the northern part of India, near the Himalayan range, and I started picking stones because that was the common canvas I could find in nature. And I started to put my emulsion onto the stones, which became very like an idea of morphing my work around a canvas. Like I had a picture, but it was not like that anymore. And then I wanted to expand the idea on something, putting my like different faces and gestures of my grandparents onto fruits, because age is defined as decay in humans, and fruit becomes something very interesting for me to see how a fruit would also grow into something more, and how it was not an image that I clicked or preserved or I was working with. So yes, you can see how the different happened, like understanding surfaces, challenging a view around preservation, and just letting go of my own mistakes and understanding my own work. These are also few other experimental pieces. This one is currently at photoprint, because now this does not look like this. It's very moldy, very fungus, and it does not look something that I created or I have shared. But I was trying to understand the idea of expansion in terms of communication with still life, like how in paintings and photography, still life was used as a sense to understand colors, contrast, light. And I just wanted to see how I can put the same vision into alternative photography as well, and in my communication and medium. This piece is titled as Still Life as well. And these are few of my experimentation again, me trying to cut the fruits and slice it and just like let it decay. And once they decay, I throw them. So they're not with me anymore. They're not a part of me, because I think first I create them. Of course, I know what they look like. And after a week or so, I don't know what they look like anymore. And this is something that I'm trying to understand over time. Conclusion of experiment 1. It's not easy to put Polaroid emulsion on fruits. Yeah, and Polaroids are expensive also. So I have to be, of course, I would not suggest anyone to kind of just directly experiment with Polaroid emulsion on fruit. Try step A, step B, step C. Once you understand A, B, C, you can actually deal with D, E, F also. So trying with paper and seeing how that would work, and then kind of morphing and understanding how the same technique would work in different shape and materials. So now I can do Polaroid lift on usually anything. It just comes like, it's something that I have been practicing, I enjoy, but I'm definitely conscious of how my money is going in it, because you have to understand that it is expensive. And then you cannot waste a lot of Polaroids in just like randomly experimenting with something also. That was my conclusion. Experiment 2. So before I start talking about experiment 2, I'll just circulate these. These are part of my experiment. I'll be talking and everyone can just see. Just have one. I hope there's definitely not enough for everyone, but I'm sorry. This is all we're just going to pass them around. Just pass them around after seeing or understanding the material. So this question revolved around the materiality of my work, narrative, of course, and alternative photography. the questions that I started with is, how does the landscape shape the stories we tell? What is the nature of belonging? And how is it connected to place or identity? How can the concept of belonging be expressed or explored through materiality of a specific medium? This was my RCA graduate project. So when I actually chose visual communication, it was more like, how can I define communication around photography? Because that is also important. It's not always like a room full of artists know what you are trying to show, but if you put something out there, how a person who has not seen that material or understanding be curious about the work itself too. So I try to expand on that idea as well. And these pictures, what you guys are seeing, are from my hometown, Dehradun. And the title of this work is Piece of Land. And these pictures are made of bioplastic. They are agar-agar and cornstarch. I will share more about the process, but you can read about the materiality here. So I actually tried to find my own ratio with the help of Martha, who is also part of the alternative group. She was working with bioplastic for a pretty long time, and I reached out to her while I was doing my own research. And what was interesting about this is that once you start putting cyanotype chemicals and with biopolymers, and if you're choosing a different brand, the ratio changes. So you have to, even if you have knowledge of something, you have to kind of figure your own way out while making it. So even if you have knowledge, you have to experiment your way through it and kind of need to find your way around it. So that's what I did, but Martha helped a lot. So these were my first ideation when I did with Petri dish. So you can see how agar-agar started to get moldy and fungus because something was off about the ratio. It was not drying, but this was also interesting. I mean, it's not something that I expected, but when it happened, I was just like, oh, it feels alive. It's very much alive, like the land itself where I come from. And these were, of course, the final outcome. That's my grandma. That's the land of my oldest house. And the idea was to kind of see and understand that whenever I go to my land, I kind of see that it has changed. My understanding with my land has changed. But it always feels very much like it's talking to me still. Like I still feel connected to it, but in a different manner, in a manner that I don't understand anymore. And working with this material is that it is also very much alive. So it taught me my understanding with the material itself. And if, I don't know, today is very cold day, but if your hands are warm and you touch the bioplastic, they actually curl. So when I put them, so this is, if someone wants to copy this, they can. These are my ratios of 10 ml agar-agar, 2 ml cornstarch combined with the cyanotype chemistry. Intersection and a blend of chemistry, materiality, and storytelling. I'll wait for 2 seconds here. Shall I move forward? This was my final display. My one key was also as an artist, I define myself as a visual artist as to how I can reduce the cost of making itself. So all the stones and the clay is, the clay I actually got from whatever was there in my ceramic class for the ceramic students, MA ceramic. And the stones I have collected from all around London. I used to just go out and collect stones. And even the grass I have dried on my own to create a display that defines land and also to experiment and to see how people would interact with the land. So the idea is to not like invite a lot of people in. Of course, a lot of people will never understand your work. That's not how it is supposed to be. Art is very subjective. What you're sharing is also very subjective at times. So it's interesting to see who are the ones who are going to pause and try to understand. So I always play with the dimension of if I'm going to put my work on the floor, how that would interact with the people. If I'm going to put my work up in the air, how would that interact with the people? That's something which makes me curious about how to display and morph photography itself. Conclusion. It took me 6 months to kind of get my chemistry right. Again, even though I had knowledge about what the ratio would be, because I was using different brand as compared to Martha, I had to kind of navigate my own way through it. But also while experimenting, all the accidents, the fungal and everything just made me curious about how I could expand on this as well, because there are so many live materials that you can use in alternative photography. For example, bacteriography, which is a combination of bacteria on agar-agar, and you can actually grow your image. Again, ephemeral photography, but it's a very interesting thing to see how this is also very much alive. Your pictures can be who you are or what you want to say. They just need to communicate for that period of time, maybe not for too long. But if they communicate something in that zone, probably that's enough as well. Experiment 3. Questions. What can be considered ephemeral in alternative photography? Can change itself be ephemeral? How can I bring my skills together to better understand the intent of holding and preserving my work? This is something that I'm trying to understand right now. Like, I'm practicing henna on my hand mostly all the time now. I'm trying to understand how an intent can actually lead to creating something. I'm distracted. So I have been, henna is actually a dye, which is very much ephemeral in nature. It is a plant-based dye, and you put it in your hand, it looks amazing. And it's something that we, in my culture, we use it for every festival as a celebration, as a sign of good luck, as a sign of prosperity. I wanted to see how henna can actually be a frame to my work. How can I hold my work? What is an intent to it? So I actually used my hand as a frame for my own creations. And these pictures are all archived of where I come from. And I use clay to create these cyanotypes because clay comes from the land itself. So you're holding the images as well. So the henna kind of just fades away. The frame stays, and the conversation around my hand and my intent of preserving and holding my work changes every single time. So, conclusion. When I try to create my work, I usually ask myself, what is my intent around creating it? Is it care? Is it something that I'm trying to tackle? Is it the idea of belongingness? I think for me, it's always the question that starts my communication with the material too, and how I choose my material, because I work with different materials, maybe a cyanotype, lumen printing, Polaroid lift. So the intent and the questions kind of make me aware how I can choose what would be an ideal way of experimentation for me. This works for me, but it might not work for many people, which is true. And that's how it should be. Yes. Thank you for sticking with me through all this.
Thanks, Ria.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. It is, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Ria. Now we've got Katie Lowe. Guessing. Yeah, got it here.
Can I put it on so I can see my name?
Yeah, is that
Yeah.
Is that, how's that showing? Oh, wait, I'm not sharing it. Okay. This is where my Zoom knowledge is too limited. And then if I do present.
I think what we did last time was if you could do present in full screen first and then do it through Zoom. So if you go to PowerPoint and click on that and then go full screen down at the bottom, the little slideshow one, that one, yeah. And then click down. And then go back into Zoom and share. Okay. Very complicated. I don't like to make it easy. There you go.
Okay, so that should hopefully be working. Okay, thanks, Katie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. So this is me, Kate. Okay, so I'm gonna do a bit of a retrospective, I guess. So a bit like Rona's. So if I just go to slideshow now.
I think if you just click
through, okay. Okay. Okie doke.
This is like, sorry, we go into Bristol, and then if you just click those arrows.
Yeah, okay. Wonderful. Okay, so gone too far now. Okay, so starting with my BA that I did at Falmouth College of Arts in 2001. So I guess I was always kind of interested in the photographic truth. Photography being linked to reality. Yeah, it's 2D. It's so far removed from reality. Always trying to make the viewer question what they're looking at as well was of interest to me. Analog process, everything was analog then. I graduated 2004. I think the Canon 5D kind of came out around 2005, and that's what killed analog, unfortunately. And also I was photographing the male form. I think through the 90s as a woman, what I kind of experienced, lots of lads mags and, you know, the internet and just women being objectified everywhere. So yeah, I kind of, wanted to change that with what I was photographing, but also working outdoors on location in the land. And I really wanted to go to Falmouth. I'm from the Midlands, kind of landlocked in the Midlands, and everywhere I applied to university was by the sea. Yeah. Okay, and then after this happened, I decided to stay in Cornwall, freelanced, went digital. You know, it almost sucked the love out of photography for me. So at that point, I sort of questioned myself and thought, you know, where have I been happiest in photography? And it was education, because it's so collaborative, and being around other creatives as well. So I did my PGCE in 2011. Absolutely brassic at the time. It was really, really tricky. And then I did that on the foundation course at Falmouth University, and watching all of these foundation students go off to university, I wanted to go back to university. So went and did my MA. At Plymouth, which was really, really wonderful. So exploring attachment to place, seasonal shifts, light and time, and very much redressing the balance of process and making through lensless techniques. So getting back to that analog and that making and that process was huge for me. And then it was basically fighting for a teaching contract in Cornwall, because there really aren't that many if you want to teach photography, which, you know, it's been a real journey, but it's been a good one. And then current status, so I currently at Falmouth University teaching foundation year photography, which is wonderful. And when that position came up, I literally was like a woman with a pickaxe. I spent hours prepping, you know, I really wanted that job. And it's a wonderful place to be, really, really is. And it's very much rebooted my career for me, which is good. So when I was doing my BA, and this kind of went through to my MA as well, this really, really chimed with me. So With mild exaggeration, one could state that the consequence of this preoccupation with representation is that virtually all photographers overlook the medium itself, in the sense that in terms of art, they only partially recognise the implications of the nature of the photographic process and the specific workings of the camera. So yeah, absolutely huge. So the actual process of making, the physicality of making, the tactile engagement of making is really, really important to me. So when I went to do my MA, this was one of my first pieces. So playing with a broken camera, this format was of interest to me, very much addressing the balance of process of making, looking at light, chemistry. And when I'm using film, I like to present it as a piece of film, you know, include the brand of film, the frame numbers in there, all to allude to the photographic process. And I've always liked transparency film, the positive process, you know, the colour that you get from that as well. And the fact that it can be a one of one, if you want it to as well. So using transparency film to make those. And one of the reasons that I went to Falmouth is because Darrow was there running photography at the time that I was studying. I actually work with him now, which is pretty cool. But basically, the format of the film that he used, so he was burying 120mm pieces of film at the time and letting all of these organisms do their thing and then kind of processing them. So that format always kind of stayed in my mind. Lensless approach by Gina Glover, very much her pinhole work, you know, and the majority of her work, she uses experimental approaches to form social commentaries about the world. And Sally Mann and her attachment to place, the deep south where she's from, the work that she makes, the collodion process that she uses, and the discrepancies form part of the story and the history of that place. Is very much part of my work as well, I guess. I'm really not precious about my film. Well, at the time, a lot of it was because I couldn't afford to get a lot of it processed. So I'd literally, you know, shoot a film, sash it under the bed, you know, the latent image, all kinds of things going on, I guess, using out of date film as well, and just letting all of those things kind of be part of the process. And then so it started. I really wanted to be able to expose a whole piece of 120mm film and push past the confines of the photographic frame. So during my MA, I got back to that problem solving within photography. And with the help of my civil partner, Richard, our brains are polar opposites in the way that we kind of think. But they came together on this project beautifully, and he helped me to develop the camera that I used to make these images. It was a real journey. It was a real labour of love, I have to say, and it took ages, but we got there in the end. So experimenting with pinhole exposures as well, it was really tricky to get the image that I wanted to get. And this was the Mark II. The camera that you can see. So the top two film strips, which are 120mm film strips, full roll of film. So to begin with, we thought having lots of different apertures or pinholes to expose them, which gave this effect. And it didn't quite work. It does work as a camera, and I do like it, and I'd like to do more with it. But we went back and we made the Mark III, which is here. And it's an absolute pain in the backside, I have to say, getting this camera around and in the landscape. And you know, I've had people approaching me and, you know, wondering what the hell I'm doing. But you know, making a 2 meter by 1 meter change bag so I can work on location, etc. Richard making the camera with a piano hinge so I can open it in this bag and load it and keep the film flat, and all of these things came into the making of this camera basically. And these were the first 2 successful images, and I was, you know, I was getting closer and closer, but I had to get these 2 images right, which I did. So it was just Falmouth Bay from Pendennis Point in Falmouth, 12 hours apart, which is something that I'm interested in as well. Same space, the ephemeral qualities of light at different times, etc. But the reason that I really wanted to nail them is because I was meeting Crystal Labar the next day. She was doing a talk at Plymouth. And she very much inspired my work in terms of the panoramic format, capturing time, and the camera's ability to capture something that the eye can't as well. So all of those things that she was interested in. So I got to show them. I had a one-to-one with her and got to show them her, and she was really chuffed for me. She so lovely. So that was, you know, a real moment. And this was the first real body of work that I made with the Mark III, kind of working on roadside verges in late spring, early summer, also on the coast path, recording what was going on there, and then going through to create my final piece, which was called Shift. And just that kind of mental block that you get when you're being creative under pressure. Didn't really know what I was doing, but I was just making lots of exposures on a favourite piece of beach on the north coast of Cornwall, which I loved. It was an excuse to go back there and work there, but didn't really know what I was doing. I had Jem teaching me, Jem Southern at the time, who's hugely influential as a landscape photographer. And he really helped me get to where I got to with Shift in the end, bless him. He's like the Attenborough of photography for me. And these are crop sections of the films working together. So when I was kind of putting them together to present them as a whole, and I knew when I chose to go to Gwydion, which, you know, it's such a special place for me, I knew that I could never encapsulate that place in one image. So yeah, this is why I had to keep going back there. I was probably making it over a period of 8 months. And you know, it's always changing, it's always in flux, the light, the tide, etc. This is where I was actually mounting the work. So I put them with the help of Jem, put them into chromatic progression, had a light box made to mount them onto. Yeah, I think I'd actually left my body at this point. It's very stressful. But here's the final thing. And, you know, it's very much one of one. So every piece of, you know, film that I shot and decided to put together into the final piece on a light box, it was 139 by 96 centimeters. So it's a big old piece of work. And it allows the viewer to look around and read the horizon, look up and down, and just sense the shifts in the light and the tide, everything that I experience in this place, basically. Yeah, so it felt really great. It really did. However, when I exhibited it, one of the first questions was, why have you only done one? But it cost an absolute fortune as well. I think it cost about £1,200 to mount, but totally worth it. And it's currently, well, it's going to be up at Photo Nostrum 2024 as well in Barcelona, which is really, really lovely. So it's still out there in the world. So after this, just things that I'm drawn to, really. So down near Land's End, these landmarks, they're really, really bizarre. I don't know if anyone's ever come across them, but they're so bizarre. There's not really any information about them. I just wanted to record them. And when I was considering the presentation, again, I was frustrated at not being able to really convey my experience in 2D form. So I turned them into 3D objects. So people could view them and navigate them as they would if they were walking towards them. And they're there basically to warn vessels of the Ronald Stone, which is a huge piece of stone in the sea, just off Land's End. So yeah, I wanted people to be able to kind of, yeah, interact with them in that way. And then this happened. So just after I finished my MA, I got a teaching contract, you know, the dream. And then I got diagnosed with DCIS, which is very early breast cancer. I was being monitored because both my sisters had breast cancer in their 30s, even though none of us have got the gene. But yeah, so this happened and it kind of scuppered me, really. And any chance that I get to speak about this, it's so important and it affects everyone, absolutely everyone, but 1 in 8 women. So please, please, please do check. Do check. But still making work, you know, the perfect time to record time while I was waiting for my pathology to come back, because I had a sentinel lymph node taken out to be tested. I was doing day-long exposures, and I'm in there off my face on meds. Yeah, waiting for the results to come back, but they came back clear, which was great after my surgery. And the level of care that I had from the NHS, you know, was amazing at that point, but it's been a long process since, you know, both mentally and physically. However, the wonderful things to come out of that, it prompted me to learn about my body, which, you know, has been a massive revelation because no one else has taught me about my body as a female. And I wanted to know why we'd all got cancer as well, all of my sisters, even though we hadn't got the gene, and reading about the impacts of things like hormones, food production, environmental things, all of these things that you're exposed to, which could have caused cancer, basically. So really started reading about that. Also reading about female representation. It's always been interesting to me. Class and land ownership at that time, which was feeding and informing my work. So seasons and cycles. Began very much working with my cycle when I began to understand my cycle at that point, and using day 1 as a reason to go out and photograph, looking at seasonal shifts, which I still very much do. Things that I'm reading at the time, they'll always inform the work. I was reading this book, the Book of Trespass, which is a great book, recommend it. And trespassed in a local wood called Hornywink Wood. And again, I was drawn to these rhododendrons. I'd been seeing them for years, and I was like, one day I'm going to photograph them, but I wanted to be able to capture that experience. And I think the pinhole camera really helped me to capture that. So this body of work came out the back of that. I was also reading this at the time, The Salt Path by Rainer Wynne. And this quote came up. So, resilient and persecuted plants that, contrary to belief, lived in the UK millennia ago. Fossils have been found that prove they grew here before the last ice age, but native plant status is reserved for plants that flourished after the ice had receded. So that quote's in the work. I also started to put personal histories into my artist statements at that point, which I put there, because sometimes I think, and it's probably depending on what my hormones are telling me at the time, but sometimes I feel okay with that, other times I feel it's a bit too hammy, etc. But I did make the link to imposter syndrome and experiencing imposter syndrome when talking about that work, and also plant blindness comes into it with the quote from Rainer Wynne. So more work from Hornywink, such a great name for a wood. And also things like out-of-date film, out-of-date Polaroid that I had, which I was just going in and recording with, which kind of makes it a little bit more sustainable, I guess. And then this body of work, Falmouth Bay, again, Richard, bless him, on a friend's boat, trying to get me, because I wanted to do sea markers. I'd got land markers, I wanted to do sea markers, trying to line me up with these markers in the sea, which was very much informed by Dark Salt Clear, which I was reading at the time, and also Folk Gray's podcast, which is a great podcast, really, really recommend it. So again, you know, this painterly aesthetic that comes from the pinhole, it gives a dreamlike feel to the sea, and it alludes to memories of place. You know, when you kind of think of places, you never have a clear memory of it. And I think that very much kind of comes through using lensless techniques and capturing time. So seasonal shifts, Walgate Woods and the Tunnel, David Hockney, love him or hate him, really interesting relationship with photography. He gets really frustrated with the 2D image, which I very much do too. And also Monet, the Impressionists, I was, you know, looking at that work quite a bit when I was making the next body of work. And I'd always been interested in the ephemeral qualities of light. So this is previous work that I'd done digitally, actually, when I was working as a wedding photographer. And I had really bad insomnia because I had so much to do. And I just started recording these light shifts in and around the house where I was living at the time, when I was up in the early hours of summer. And this was my response to, you know, the likes of Hockney and Monet at the time, going back usually on day one of my cycle and photographing this little boat on Myler Creek, which is really close to where I live. Just drawn to it and wanted to record it. And apart from when it snows, because you don't get much snow in Cornwall, so decided to just, you know, go out of sync a bit there. So yeah, and this is all of the images together. I haven't kind of presented them really as anything other than on my website at the moment, and I'm still thinking about how to do that for a possible exhibition that we're doing through the university. So the title, Two Men and a Boat, you know, it alludes to Hockney and Monet. But I've also put in there the environmental issues that I was seeing at the time. So on Myler Creek, lots of boat owners, in the spring months, they scrape anti-foul off the bottom of their boats when it's low tide, because you can walk up the foreshore. And they just leave it there for the tide to take, which really, really frustrated me. So I wanted to get that narrative in there as well. And just the fact that it's quite posh, Myler. And I just think there's a guy in the village who has lots of secondhand cars on the road, you know, and this is terrible. What he's doing is absolutely awful, but no one seems to care about the fact that, you know, these boat owners do this as well. So I wanted to kind of link class into it as well. So aesthetics and social commentaries, you know, they're always linked very much in the work that I make. And I guess it's similar for everyone. So where now? So again, things that I'm interested in, things that I'm reading at the moment. So I've been supermarket free for 6 years, basically massive lifestyle shift when I got ill, and kind of looking at all of those environmental factors that could have kind of fed into the cancer. So I've been supermarket free. I've been predominantly organic. I'm very lucky where I live in Falmouth. There's lots of local growers. There's a great local market, etc. So thinking about food production, female representation and histories in nature very much is coming into the work. Wilding and making that accessible to everyone, not just wealthy landowners like NEP. You know, wilding and NEP is a wonderful thing, but it's only accessible to them because they're loaded, basically. Mycelium, you know, I'm sure everyone in here is quite interested by that at the moment. And local organic produce and seasonal produce is very much going to inform the work. And I'm really not going to go far with this. So, you know, working with local growers, etc. But also in my 45th year, we finally got onto the property ladder and got a house, and we've got a garden. So I want to start growing and just kind of witnessing what goes on in the garden, etc. The lady that lived there before me, she was very much about permaculture, and it's very organic wild space. So looking at those things really and seeing where it goes. So yeah, that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Oh, have you got the schedule in front of you? I didn't look at it before I came over here. Yeah. Okay, I'll get Nikki's up. Okay. Sorry, Nikki. This one, and then we go back to this. Okay. Nikki Gandhi.
How you doing, everyone? It's nice to be here this afternoon. Thank you for having me. So I'm Nikki. I'm an interdisciplinary artist from Staffordshire. I'm an artist educator and a PhD researcher working through the University of Wolverhampton. So I'd never call myself a photographer, but I do make work largely using expansions of photography. So just a brief kind of practice summary. My practice addresses time as an experiential construct and emphasizes the paradox of the moment. Okay, so I say the word now, it's already past. It explores its own roots in photographic history, so that's something that we've touched on a little bit this afternoon, among other practices, and incorporates the contemporary application of elements of its photographic history through contemporary practices. It addresses disciplines and fields to include photography, mark making, impermanence, and temporality, and investigates the medium specificity of photography, so its ontology and its perceived boundaries, with a view to expanding this through the Greek etymological translation of light image, so any image that is composed of light and therefore time. It examines the impact of photography's two main components, light and time, upon the image after the fact, through the introduction of duration to a still image. And it's underpinned by a theoretical framework around memory, temporality, nostalgia, and the moment, examining aspects of the Zen idiom ichigo ichie, which basically just means once meeting, or in this moment, opportunity, to conceptualize and create contemporary and photographic works. So through my slides, you'll see little quotes from it's not actually moving forward. It's not going. You'll see elements of oh, it seems to be shifting
that bit, not that bit.
Cool. It seems to be shifted. Yeah, there we go. So you'll see elements of the theory that underpins my practice alongside. Okay, so the practice starts with kind of building on what Katie just mentioned about watching light shift through interiors. During lockdown, I found myself in a largely dilapidated Victorian mansion house with these beautiful lattice windows. I spent a lot of time there on my own. Husband was an NHS worker, so there was no furlough for him. So I was kind of just rattling around like a ghost in this building, drifting while the light drifted through as well. And I realized that I was kind of learning to tell the time in an unconventional way by where the shadow patterns were throughout the building. And kind of that these shadows were never going to be at the same point twice throughout the year because of the sun's arc and where it appears. So I started photographing it, and in quite a conventional way to begin with. But my relationship with the photographic medium is kind of broken. I've taught it for 16 going on 17 years now, and I've experienced a lot of toxicity in that world. So I guess with my relationship being broken, I found myself actually trying to break the medium in some ways. So I began to explore different processes, including thermography. Now, if you've ever left a receipt in your car and then come back to it ages later and then found that actually you can't read it anymore, this is the process of thermography. It is a paper that is in itself transient. You will lose it very, very easily if it's exposed to sun, if it's exposed to heat, and effectively time. So this was the first piece that I produced using that process. I photographed the windows, the shadow of the windows, and then I hung it back in the windows. So you see this kind of masking, the kind of X's on the darker part on the left here are where it is masked. And then over time, the further image there is how it looks. Well, more recently, it's far more faded than that even now. Okay, so two larger pieces that I produced using this process from night into day. I was part of a collaboration with some residents of a prison, and I produced these pieces of work, which I will actually pass around for you to look at. They're 4.5 meters long, and they were photographed using a pinhole camera made from a matchbox. If they end up at the back, that would be great. So the darker one of the three. Could you pass that back for me as well? Cheers. The darker one of the three is not being exposed. It's not being shown at any point. The other two, hopefully you'll be able to see elements of masking and the imprints from the spaces in which they were hung. Sorry for those of you that are viewing online, you should be able to see on the screen elements of the lattice work. What people in the room are seeing is also the bars of prison windows and then an entirely monochrome image. So these were produced, exposed on thermographic paper, hung within the windows of the spaces, and then later exhibited in those spaces. So they've been exhibited in different ways. And what interests me about this paper is it's very tactile. It actually indexes the environment in which it's hung. It responds to humidity. So it feels different depending on how long it's been displayed for. And I hope you'll be able to see that when you compare the ones that have been exposed to the ones that haven't further back in the room now. Okay, so there is an example of it being hung in HMP Grendon, side by side. On the right, the image composed and re-exposed within the windows of my home. And on the left, hopefully you can just about make out the barred windows of the prison there. Okay, and one final thermographic print. Cast, so once again hung back in within the footprint of those windows, which I've become so fixated with over time. Okay, so the second strand of the body of work that I want to show you today, and there are three, is a more performative element. I realised that this process of producing the work and then moving away from it is a form of performance in itself. The work performs itself. So I kind of experimented with the idea that the process of the work's making is actually the work. The work itself becomes almost like a byproduct of that. So here I am. These are stills from a video called Yesterday Today, where I tried to physically graph the process of the light passing across that surface, just using graphite. Yes, there is drawing here and there is video, but what I'm trying to do there is perform the process that a camera takes when producing a photograph. That video is available on my website if someone wanted to view it. It's about 8 minutes long. And that's a process that I carried on into my work later on. So I brought the graphite in. My work's never fixed. It will always continue to evolve. It will eventually disappear one way or another. It'll either go into complete darkness or it will go into complete light, as you'll see shortly. So this was a piece that I created a lumen print onto aluminium and worked into it with a graphite glaze. And the idea is that the graphite glaze will shift over time, so it will expose to light at different intervals. And it's literally got to the point where it's rejecting itself now, and the emulsion has burst open, and eventually we will just be left with a sheet of aluminium. And then bringing back the process of Yesterday Today, I brought into photographic chemistry. So another video available in waiting sees me sitting in the spotlight of those windows, trying to keep up with the passage of light there. The introduction of extended structures of temporality and the idea, again, that someone mentioned earlier, of slowness. Photography has become such a rapid and disposable medium that I guess I'm trying to reverse that in some ways with what I'm doing, while I take myself back to the very, very basics of photography. Photography was not a fixed medium for the first 50 or so years of its conception. Even after the early kind of pioneers felt that they'd fixed, they were still very susceptible to fading by light. And really and truthfully now we don't have a permanent medium. Think about things like Snapchat and social media. These images disappear very rapidly. You've probably got phones full of photographs that you've never even opened. I know I have got thousands of them. So the idea there is, are they really permanent? Okay, and another one where we kind of make the idea of making the artist's hand visible. Again, painting in photographic chemistry, combining it with elements of the graphite so that it will shift. This piece is entitled Engrams, which is a physical representation of memory within the brain, and you can't have a memory without an engram linking hands with another engram. So the idea, for instance, that scent is very intrinsically linked to memory. If you smell something and you're taken back to your childhood, it's your mum's perfume or something along those lines. Those are the engrams doing their jobs. And that's why we have that kind of sensory awareness around time. Okay, so this was a more expanded drawing. It's entirely completed in photographic chemistry, and it was displayed at New Art Gallery Warsaw for a month. So that was as it was. I think the chemistry is still wet in this photograph here. And it was left to expose over time. So there's quite some evolution there. And if I just show you the close-up there, what I found really interesting about this piece of work is that the metals within the chemistry, the silvers, the irons, start to rise to the surface. There's no fixing again in this, and the fixing is what kind of washes that surplus chemistry away. So by not fixing it, you get this beautiful kind of metallic sheen to it. Which I found really interesting, because when you go back to the early stages of photography, you've got this kind of competition between paper-based and metal plates. And for me, that's kind of a hybrid process here, which is again why I shifted my work back to aluminium plates, again combining all of the photographic chemistry, the drawing and the graphite. Fox Talbot famously referred to photography as the pencil of nature. So again, there are real links there between the process of drawing and the process of photography. With this piece, I was trying to make what I described as a dynamic image. I was interested in the idea that when you look at what appears to be a still image, you don't see the whole. You see it under different lights, you see it from different angles. So it's very, very heavily burnished. It's still evolving because of the chemistry, but the graphite there adds another kind of tier to that. And as the light hits it, when you view it, it kind of intercepts what you're seeing. And of course, under different lights, you see different elements of mark making there as well. That's just another view of it taken from a slightly different angle and installation view, with the light reacting with it. Okay, and this is just something that I wanted to touch on today. It's a new process that I've been working on through my PhD. Something that I've loosely termed cipherography. And it's kind of based on the idea that if you were ever, as a child, did you ever write a secret letter in lemon juice, or yeah, and then you get your mum to iron it for you and it becomes visible. Okay, so this was a really, really badly exposed screen print done using home methods. So I've experimented with creating my own emulsion and ways of managing to screen print using ciphering. And by leaving this to react to the light back in the footprint of those windows that it features, it actually does reveal itself over time. So I do have, which you're very welcome to have a look at. It's not a heavy piece. There we go. A framed piece in what would be considered its latent stage, but the difference between this and our darkroom photography is that we don't need to make any chemical intervention. There is a chemical process involved with it, as light and time affects it, and particularly heat. It will begin to bring out the carbons within the emulsion on it, and it will darken. So it's quite interesting for me that I've gone from producing work that disappears into light, or producing work that disappears into darkness, to producing something that actually appears over time. And the thing about that there is, actually, when I begun my work, it came out of a period of, well, it was an all-time low. So actually I was, without really thinking about it, expressing that. Now I'm making work that is more about hope, I suppose, than it is about loss. So over the period of about 3 or 4 years that I've been putting this body of work together, actually, I've seen the transformation that my photography is seeing without even thinking about it. So I do feel now that I'm starting to come out of the other side of something. And I'm really looking forward to what's next. So that's me. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Right. So it's just Rebecca left to present, and then we're going to have some questions afterwards. Doing the Zoom dance. And then yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for,
And was it that one? Was it that?
I think it's these
Oh,
guys.
that one with that.
Yeah, clicking.
With that one, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, thank you. Stand up. Thanks so much. Thanks Lizzie and Sophie for the opportunity to share some of the work, and yeah, the kind of overlaps and ideas and thoughts from everyone. It's really fascinating and yeah, really interesting. So I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about some work that I'm making at the moment, which is centred on a place called Avonmouth in North Somerset, which is a small residential town and a huge industrial area. And it's peripheral to Bristol, peripheral to this place. It's built on an area of drained salt marsh, and it's drained by these old ditches that are called reens. And what I've noticed through a while of photographing here is the presence of logistics and distribution infrastructure and waste processing plants. So the sewage treatment, there's landfill, incinerator, there's Amazon, you can see it there, Amazon warehousing, Asda, there's a lot of warehousing. It's an active port. And so the whole place is dominated by speed. So I've been working this place for a year or so and using processes which allow me to slow the making that I do and to think about the impact of time and conditions on the processes I use and on my body as well during these processes as a means to try to think about or perhaps resist some of the aspects of speed and I suppose ideas of maybe that we might call the instant, like an instant response that we have in terms of the digital media that we use, and the kind of, I think there's an expectation or like our notifications that we're always available and that we're always responding. So it's an attempt, I think, to try to resist a little bit of that. So I'm going to share just two approaches from this body of work that I've been making. Initially, some pinhole photographs of this that I've been making, and also some glass slides and a few different ways that I've been using these glass slides. But this is all work in progress at the moment, so it all feels quite raw and a little bit exposing. But also I've found through making these some clarity in ways of that I think are enabling me to think about the past and future lives or states, I think lives, of matter, waste and extracted materials. So that's why I'm also really interested in this area, because of the speed of kind of turnaround of import, use, process and disregard. So it's all present in this placing in very kind of close proximity. So the first couple of slides are using, these are pinholes. I've been making pinhole photographs here for a long time. So obviously without a lens. So I think quite a lot about how air enters the space of the camera body. And I think about that almost like an exposure, almost like a breath that's kind of coming in to the camera.
And I think about the impact of light on the paper, so just using paper negatives. Are also about as basic as I can go. So I'm attempting to make things that are very uncomplicated. So I'm just thinking about time, light, photosensitivity. So these slow me down in this landscape and offer another set of ways of working, perhaps. So I get cold during these exposures during the winter. The sewage treatment plants nearby, the biodigester impact on my working. They come into my body through my nostrils. I taste them through those interconnected senses. And I feel a kind of an additional link to my camera body in some senses there as well. So these ditches, these reens, are really still. They don't have any visible flow. Therefore, they also offer a means to think about types of slow exchange. So some of these are brackish, so some salt water comes into these. So that combination of salt and fresh is something which I find really interesting. They're also sites of pollution. But also because of the slowness, they're also positioned sort of in opposition to the speed that's around them. Yeah, so I process these in bramble, leaf, and nettle. And that's something, oh yeah, so I've collected these, I've collected the nettle or the bramble during the period of the exposure time. So these exposures range, obviously, depending on my lighting conditions. And so they can vary between 4:20, sometimes much longer, depending on the time of day. But I'm using that time, that duration, as a kind of parameter to either gather some of the materials that I'm using to turn into developing chemistry. Sometimes I'm writing, recording in different forms. I'm recording sound, I'm recording birdsong. But also with the slowness of the processes of alternative chemistry, that idea of exhaustion is obviously so much more kind of part of that process. So I'm just able to use the chemistry a couple of times, and then the exhaustion is very apparent. And I'm really interested in that. So the ideas of use and obsolescence, and again connected to the speed of use and obsolescence within the landscape that I'm exploring. So how I use experimentation. So I followed the sort of materials that I'm using, and I'm finding the materials in the landscape. So following those materials, I make decisions about what I'm using and how I'm using it. So I don't have a conception of an idea, but I'm responding to the things as I come into contact with them. And incidentally, but consciously, I think I'm also, like I think we all are, rejecting digital means as a primary approach, but I'm also massively acknowledging its presence in all other parts of my of this practice. I store in the cloud. I'm conscious of the way that energy uses, all the uses that we've got around us, the impacts of cloud storage and image processing. Oh yeah, I went to this one a bit quick. So yeah, so this one, I'm making glass slides, but this idea of comes from a desire, I think, to bypass the creation of a negative, or rather to that I've got an interest in making negatives from objects. So I've sort of thought about that, and I'm sort of tracing this back to things that I found in fields on walks with my children when they were really small. So this is like 15 years ago, 18 years ago. Picking things up that we found interesting. So I also like to misuse equipment. I think there's a kind of inner desire to not use, yeah, perhaps to consciously misuse is something I've noticed that I'm drawn to quite a lot. I'm always using these kind of carefully and cleaning afterwards, but basically I'm misusing the enlarger. So I'm putting objects into the top of the enlarger where the negative would be, so in the neg carrier. So I'm exploring again in very basic ways something of the qualities of the things I found to connect with the times and places, and importantly, like different modes of time. So we've talked a little bit about temporalities and different types of time, different modes of time. So each of these creatures is no longer alive. It's had a different lifespan. It's operated on a different mode of time. So yeah, so basically I'm making these glass slides, and when as I'm making them, I'm kind of asking, I think, what happens when, what would happen if I bypass representation of a place and follow the materials to this site instead of a representation of that site. So so I'm implicating the material in what I do, hoping to not simply use it, but also to consider it as a kind of coactant. So I made these first slides out of mud from a cliff fall. And these are projected. So these are 35mm glass slides, and then I put them into a slide projector, and they do this slightly strange thing. So I just use these with gum arabic. So again, there's that kind of link to other photographic processes, but I'm just mixing mud with my fingertip and putting it onto a piece of glass. But then there's this weird thing that happens that I was really compelled by. So some of these kind of do a weird sort of convulsing where they become, there's a sort of visual trick, I think, that happens where they sort of seem to suggest a physicality that isn't present. They're a blob of mud on a piece of glass, but they seem to have a physicality when light is passed through them or when they come into contact with light, which suggests something perhaps outside of or beyond the place that I found it. They've kind of become more. And also I quite liked that I was projecting. I wasn't making a thing. I wasn't making a piece of paper. I wasn't making a photographic object, an image object, if you like. And I was wondering again whether that's part of like the lowest impact photographic practice I can possibly make is like not to make any photographs at all. But I'm not sure. Anyway, a little bit bleak, perhaps. So then this image shows some projections, but also how I'm using these slides. I mask them and I work in the darkroom as well. And then, so yeah, so these are projected. And then that one is printed. And so this is just how I'm just masking them and I'm putting them into an egg carrier in the darkroom. And then they kind of, then I'm also printing some. So some worked better than others. And then I'm asking myself, well, what does that kind of really mean? What does it mean if something kind of works better in one form or another? And I think that for me, it's like if something sort of surprises me, that again, this material in combination with light can sort of transform into something else. But I also think this is what can happen in the darkroom. It can be a kind of a space where transformations happen. So these aren't really negatives or positives, and I quite like working within, like, I don't think we've particularly talked about binary notions of negatives and positives, but I kind of guess that we're probably all thinking about language all the time as well. And there are spaces and ways that we operate without thinking about negatives and positives, that sometimes they just are both or neither or all of it or something. So yeah, these are kind of these are mud that I've collected from the reams that I'm working with. And these then I've started also using egg white as well as gum arabic. So I'm really interested in kind of the ways in which these connect to photographic histories, but also art historical kind of context, I guess, visual cultural context. It's to think about preservation and varnish, perhaps the sort of surfaces, to extend the longevity of an artwork, and to act as a kind of means of preservation. But also I'm really interested in this idea of holding, like albumin holding a piece of discarded matter. So this is like waste that I pick up from a road outside a waste processing plant. So it's I don't know what it is. It's like nothing. But using albumin, there's something about the carrying of that which I'm really drawn towards. So yeah, that's what these are. So sometimes this is still drying and evolving. So I was really interested in your work, Nikki, like the idea that the work is continually, it's still active, it's still doing its thing. So sometimes when I project these, the heat from the lights cracks the albumin as I'm, I can hear it. But I'm also taking photographs of these as I'm projecting them. And so, yeah, so ultimately I'm thinking about the kind of past and future lives of matter, waste and extracted materials. So each of these materials and histories exists through a different temporality. And I think of this work as existing within multi-species timeframes or temporalities. And in so doing, I can think about past and futures in ways that are basically beyond my own lived conception of time. So I'm thinking about archaeology, and I'm thinking about geology, and I'm thinking about future time frames, and I'm thinking about future archaeology. And so I've got this, I think about this kind of figure, if you like, as of a future archaeologist or a sort of time traveler who I think sort of helps me, or maybe it is me, to enables me to sort of think about to think forwards and backwards simultaneously around time and the ways in which different materials hold different types of temporalities. So at the moment, this is also taking the form of writing and film in ways of thinking that can suggest alternative timeframes, which I'm really enjoying. But also I'm working these slides and some of this work into that kind of new writing and film work. And this is kind of where my thinking is at the moment. So thanks.
Well, thanks, Becky. We can have questions now. So if you guys could come back up. And I've got a few questions, and I think there's a question in the chat as well. That's going to be slightly distracting, but that's fine. Okay. Thanks, everyone. If we want to get cozy as well, that might be good, because I'm just thinking, yeah, like speech-wise, and there's more people in this one. So, yeah, I'm going to have a look at my notes briefly. Okay, so I did have a question for all of you guys. Becky, do you want to come here? Sorry. I was actually wondering about, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, actually, but I thought I'd bring it here because I'm in a room full of women, non-binary, trans artists, whether the alternative photography and being a woman or a non-binary or trans artist is interlinked, and how you see it as being interlinked, if you've even thought about it. If you haven't, that's totally fine, but I wondered if anybody had any thoughts on that whilst we're in this room together. Anybody wanna?
I think I started my professional career in filmmaking. So my first degree was in video and film production, which I guess that's where the photography initially fell out of. I got kind of a fine art background first, then the film and TV production, and then photography came as a kind of slipstream down the middle. And yeah, it's really male dominated. There were maybe 4 girls on the film and TV production course. For the year that I freelanced after that, everyone I worked with was male. I couldn't hack the hours, I'll be honest with you. Really late nights, not for me at all. I'm definitely a morning person rather than an evening person. So I ended up kind of taking time out of that and then finding my way into teaching. And as I say, for 17 years now, I've taught photography, predominantly male students, apart from the small period when I was teaching in an all-girls school, and then it was low class numbers. So I guess, yeah, the kind of technical side of things tends to appeal to male, the kind of engineering, scientific based side of things, and the experimental side as a woman, I think we tend to maybe gravitate more towards arts and more towards, certainly from my own perspective anyway. So I guess that's where I've gone the alternate route rather than the kind of everything's got to be done technically correct, you know, the engineered route, I guess.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Ria?
I mean, echoing the same thought as Nikki said, like, I think, so of course, I've been navigating through my space in India and then coming to the UK and understanding how generally, you know, you fit in and your identity fit in is kind of important, because I did not start with photography. I was into creative direction, and then I saw that the people I was working with was just all males. And it was quite dominating in a lot of sense to even put myself forward and, you know, be like, no, I want this, I need to get this done. And this is how I vision it for myself. And because it is my vision, this should be an outcome. Of course, there's collaboration, there's, you know, space for everyone to be heard, but how often that's welcomed in a good sense without, without of some remark. Like, I think I have been in that space, and I'm trying to also be respectful about a lot of things, and of course not take it in a negative way. But in terms of education, I think I always respected education, because that gives room to everyone to expand on how they want to be or how they actually can bring change around the space, even not for the previous generation, but the generation now and the generation to come, because everyone should feel heard, no matter where you are, how you are, and whatever you are doing. It should be a safe space, no matter how many mistakes you make. So I think that was very important, because often, a lot of times, I have not felt heard myself. Like, I was possibly changing my own outlook about things, but then, yeah, I'm here, I'm working on it step by step. And it feels good to be welcomed in a space and, you know, share my opinions and be like, no, I got this as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Ria. Anybody else from this side of the room?
Yeah. I think for me, it's very much a reason to go out and engage with the land, which I love. It's an excuse to do that, to record it if I see a place or I've been to a place that I want to go back to. I think I also, there's something weird if I'm just going out for a walk on my own. I feel quite vulnerable. Whereas if I've got my camera stuff with me, you know, my pinhole, my tripod and stuff, I don't know, but I feel quite safe with that, and just being there. Yeah, and I think the alternative process, it's very much about problem solving, and not knowing what you're going to get. It's not instant. Taking me back to the magic of analog, which is why, you know, I loved photography and being in the darkroom, etc. Very much as well. Yeah, and it almost kind of takes all of the technical stuff, which I've never really quite got, and my students think I'm joking, you know, when I'm talking about some things when I'm not. So all of those things really. I forgot to show you, I have got pieces of film with me, folks, so the main thing, so that's an example of all of them.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess it's an excuse to go out and be and experiment and play and all of those things.
Yeah, just picking up on, I've always found that quite a kind of, I haven't been particularly comfortable in the kind of controlled, techie, you know, numerically focused, if I'm really honest. And also we were touching on it earlier, like the idea of clarity and certainty. It's just like I've never particularly, I'm not particularly certain. I don't feel particularly clear sometimes about some of the things. I can make judgments on what I see and what I've made, perhaps, but I'm usually evolving or feeling my way through things. I don't have like a really like a snap decision that something's absolutely right. I tend to be much more interested in evolving set decisions, but also around ecology. So for me, it's like I think there's a whole lot of stuff around extraction that and ecology that to me it may not be necessarily about male identifying, you know, people, but to me there's definitely aspects of extraction which I think are really or what I'm really conscious of and wanting to explore. So like the Rees sisters, there's an exhibition at Barbican last year that kind of, you know, it's like people, you know. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and there was actually a question for you, Becky. So what type of pinhole camera, homemade or commercially produced, and paper do you use?
Yeah, I just use I bought a pinhole camera because I wanted consistency, and I've made some in the past where the precision, unless I'm engineering a pinhole, I have found that it's not giving me I wanted something consistent because I knew this was going to be a really long-term project. So I'm like first year into about a 6-year PhD, so I really want something that's gonna stand the duration. And I just use resin coated, although it's not particularly about, I'm using old resin coated. I'm using stuff that I found. I'll be using stuff that I bought on eBay that's expired. But then I'm also using some fiber based as well. So I'm just using, you know, nothing special, and that's sort of part of the point.
Nice. Any questions from the room? These people. If not, I have questions. Okay. Yeah, Lizzie.
It sort of came up a few times in multiple presentations that was like cost of photography and just how expensive it is these days. I don't know about you guys, but it's screaming when you're trying to get a project done and you're trying to exhibit it and you want to go down the world, and it's just so expensive. And I feel that sometimes with alternative photography, it can be a little more accessible in some cases, because some of the stuff is, you know, like you can find it like plant-based, you can go foraging, but then some of the stuff is very expensive. So I was just wondering, anyone, if you have any thoughts on how you're dealing with that and the sheer cost of working with these processes.
So those long pieces that are passed around, the thermographic prints, as I mentioned, they were taken using a matchbox-based pinhole camera. They were processed in Caffenol. So if you're not aware of that process, you can process darkroom photography in a multitude of different solutions. This one particularly used really, really cheap Aldi coffee, vitamin C tablets. And, you know, I've used things like nettles to process. I think that was mentioned. Somebody mentioned using nettles earlier on as well. Yeah. So there are all kinds of things that you can extract tannins from, that people perhaps wouldn't even realize you can use photographically. So actually, yeah, you can be really, really resourceful with the darkroom side of things. And with the pinhole cameras, if you're like myself, where you're not too worried about consistency, I've made pinhole cameras out of all kinds of household objects, including tea strainers, cream crackers. I made one out of a crumpet, a teapot I used, watering can, all kinds of things. So I've experimented as well with the multi-aperture process. But a lot of the time, the things that I used to make photographs, I've already got lying around in the house. So yeah, the paper's expensive, and ironically, really far more expensive if it's out of date. I'm finding, hey, we like experimental, but we like to pay for it. So yeah. Anybody else?
I mean, for me, I think in terms of my the project piece of land for graduation, I actually narrowed down to my course to show my graduation project in just 60 pounds. Me collecting stones from London was a part of it, and just asking other master students in like ceramics, like if they have like, you know, clay that I can use to build a land of my own. And working with bioplastic, of course, there is less use of water. So I used to actually use my bathtub in my house to kind of develop all my bioplastic. And even when you are using the bioplastic chemistry, the use of cyanotype chemical is less. So I actually used very less chemical to develop my whole project. And I have possibly created like 50 bioplastic just to experiment, but still my cyanotype chemistry is still there and left. But if I use it on paper, of course, it absorbs more of it. So that was a nice understanding that I'm still trying to develop on with different materials, especially when it comes to the science part of mycelium be included in photography as well. That would be interesting to see because these things grow and that would just expand on the material as well, making it interesting.
Anything from you guys?
Yes, so I think with the positive process and trying to keep things as one of one, kind of going against photography and the fact that you can reproduce an image again and again and again. So yeah, keeping things as one of one, as photographic objects. Paper negs as well with pinholes. It's quite funny that we're such perfectionists with pinholes, trying to get consistency.
There's a
with
contradiction there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there really is. But also there's Sustainable Darkroom out there, and Falmouth Uni, they're going to put an open call out, by the way, very soon for a Sustainable Darkroom conference next summer, which I think is going to happen, which is really, really great. So I do, as I kind of go into my garden, I do want to use much more plant-based alternative processes and it's an excuse to do that, really. It really is. So yeah,
I think there's a kind of double-edgedness to that, because I think not to that, but I mean to the question, response to the question, because I think that it kind of perhaps speaks to commercial applications as well. So the idea of the photo book or the a large exhibition and so I think that's where there's some really interesting research going on at the moment around sustainable ink that could be used commercially. Or so the photographer Claire Hewitt is developing kind of mushroom paper and sustainable print. So the idea that the whole photo book could potentially be composted. I mean, it'd be a beautiful thing when it's done. So I don't know why you might want to do that, but so I think that's where there's some really interesting kind of drawing out of those kinds of questions. So that's also around the idea or the question really of like value and cost. And then that's what I'm really interested in: waste and discard and the impact, really, like the kind of ecological impact of some of that. So they're all really wrapped up questions, aren't they? Or rather wrapped up kind of terms around value and cost and things. So yeah.
Any other questions from the room? Oh, hello.
What do you all think, like, about the sort of therapeutic potential of authentic photography? Like in terms of, I think a lot of people speak about it being mindful and encouraging being present. I think that's something that I work for a charity, so I'm trying to utilize that myself with young people. And I'm wondering how you feel that can be shared and what needs to happen for it to be kind of known as not just a creative medium, but also as a therapeutic medium. Like, I don't know what that means to you guys.
I did a workshop with Grenfell Community NHS Foundation recently, and it was with neurodivergent kids, like, and it was so we did like a cyanotype workshop, and it's kind of interesting because how you, of course, everyone in this room is ready to understand what you're going to share. But when you enter a space when there are small kids and you're trying to make them aware, especially they are neurodivergent like ADHD and they're autistic, you have to be mindful how you are inviting them into the space as well, especially with chemicals. So I mean, it is a very interesting thing how we call it. It can be art therapy, but especially making them aware of what they're using. For example, with cyanotyping, I told them it's magic. So just changing my terminology to something that would make them aware of the space and invite them in. Of course, there was a lot of time where I was just like, they're probably not doing anything. But we have to be also mindful of that space that we are giving them, because we can sit here, we can listen to everyone. We actually came for this, so we have the capacity for this. But when you're doing a workshop, the very intent of how it can be inviting for other people becomes, especially different age groups. And if you are inviting neurodivergent kid into the space, then how you're going to be changing the terminology regarding the knowledge being shared. I think that breaks the wall. How you change the words, how you play with the words, how you make it more comfortable for them in terms of education, because they would not understand, like, if I start explaining bioplastic or agar. So you have to just be like, okay, this is magic, do you want to do something creative? So you start with this and it just happens slowly, because I'm also trying to understand how this would play a role in terms of education for different age groups as well, not just like us who are interested in it. But if you want to invite someone into art space and they don't have the knowledge about it, how that can be shared forward is something I'm trying to deal with. Hope that helps. Anybody else?
So as an educator, it's kind of a conflict here, educator, artist. I work in, at present, a CAMHS hospital. So I'm working with children with more young people with a wild variety of needs, and therapy is obviously a massive part of what is undertaken within that hospital space. So as part of the education team, I'm kind of conditioned to keep the therapy away from what I'm doing, because I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified to be unlocking things within the education space. It's a safe space away from that. Very, very separate. But in terms of my own personal practice, yes, the photography or the arts side of things has helped me work through an awful lot. I found that in the most difficult times of my life, I've just worked and worked and worked through it using my practice. So I think it's about encouraging people to find the things that help them. That's the element of therapy that I would bring into art. Qualified arts therapist, not a problem.
Anything from you guys?
Briefly, I think that there's a presence, that being present, making of any form, and that's really strong, I think, in alternative photographic processes. Sometimes you're in a playful space, sometimes you're in a sort of contemplative space, but you tend to be more physically present, perhaps, than I find on a screen-based retouching or whatever else might be involved. Or so yeah, I think there's like a being present and switching off is probably part of it.
It's such a visual thing. So, being in the darkroom doing cameraless techniques, or being outside doing songrams or cyanotypes, the physicality, and it's such a tangible thing, and actually kind of seeing what's happening. It's really funny. I always do a 10-8 workshop with my students, and just looking through the 10-8 camera and at what they're looking at, they're just like, whoa, it's like real time. And it's like, yeah, so all of those things, I think, just engaging in process and the fact that you don't have everything now, yeah, it just becomes therapeutic as you're doing it. But I do have arguments all the time. I physically make my students go to the darkroom, and tomorrow I'm in the darkroom with them all day. But there's a few of them that didn't want to go into the darkroom, but they've since been in the darkroom. They loved it. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Cool. Any other questions?
have you seen the glass panoramic plates that are at Bradford Science and Media Archive?
No, but some Jem mentioned those to me when I was doing my MA, so I would like to.
Yeah, they're really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I just recommend because they're really cool.
Yeah, no, I'll have to go up there, be an excuse.
Yeah.
How are we doing for time? Okay, I've got a quick question for Ria. Do you like mold? But did you start out when you started your projects and the materiality? Did you see that as a sort of end result initially, or was it sort of like, oh, mold, this is great, I love mold? Or did you come to an understanding of mold and then like the mold after you discovered that? Does that make sense?
It is. I'm navigating it in my head. I think so. Of course, because I did not know what I was working with, when I started to mix all the biopolymers together, I did not know what the outcome will be. So the first picture when I did the cyanotype on agar-agar, I kept it for like 2 days and it did not dry. So that resulted in a mold growing. And I was just like, how should I take it to college to present to my tutor? So it's like, there's this interesting conversation in my head because, you know, what am I gonna show it to her? But then the thing is that when I started to see it, it was something very interesting that so in RCA, there's this space called Natural Material Lab. So that was my den throughout my graduation because I loved the idea of fungus, bacteria, mycelium, and anything living in photography itself as an alternative ephemeral medium. So I used to kind of see how these things work, but I was not sure that it would result in a mold. So when it did, it was fascinating. And now it just makes me more and more curious how it would result in so many things, because there's definitely a term like bacteriography. And people are working with bacteria and photography with, positive, negatives, and using UV light to make yeast photograms and everything. So which is exciting. There's also this segment that is still people are exploring and researching around, which I now feel I will be entering, because that one mold makes me think, oh, this is alive. This is very much in the conversation of land, me talking to the land, because now the picture is also talking to me. So yeah, I think that's how accident. It was just
Awesome.
there.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've run out of time now. Lizzie, do you want to come over here and do a little send off? Yeah.
Do all the speakers want to come up here for a second and they can all maybe we can celebrate the incredible presentations we've had today.
The protector off.
Yeah, might as well. Maybe do you want to hit the lights? So we got some more lights up here. So here we all are. Thank you so much to everyone that joined online, and thank you to our incredible presenters. Thank you to Sophie for hosting us here at Folk House or Bristol. Bristol, yeah. And thank you all for coming. It has been, I was a little worried that no one was going to show up. So thank you so much for coming. And for anyone that has traveled all the way here, I know that the travel was a little difficult this morning. So thank you so much for coming. Sophie's going to do a tour of the darkroom. Yeah. If anyone's interested in that, but before you leave, let's get a picture of all of us so that we can put it on social media. And we'll say goodbye to everyone online. Thank you so much for coming. And hopefully you didn't get too seasick with us moving the camera around. But I hope everyone has a really safe journey home. We will be doing the online conference in February. If you are all interested in joining us for that. And I think I'll stop talking. Anything you want to say?
I don't think so.
No?
Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Oh no, now I have to figure out how to stop recording. Stop, there we go.